Okay. By the end of the month, you need to know the name of every single person in this masjid. That's yaqeen. All right. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. So while we're talking about knowing everyone in the masjid, who can tell me what the khutbah was about today? In one sentence. Which one? Very good. First khutbah. Number one, I just want to state for the record, I finished at 2:15 today. So I was very proud of myself for finishing on time, and I know the board was happy too. What was the khutbah about today? Yes, Brother Rahman. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Jazakallah khair, Brother Luqman. We talked about Allah's gift to us with the month of Ramadan and the way that the gates, what it means when we say the gates of paradise are open, the gates of hellfire are closed, and the devils are chained away. Now, with that being said, what about the devils that aren't chained away? What about the people in your life that lead you astray? How do you deal with shayateen al-ins, all right, the human devils? So for the record, let me say, don't chain anybody. No putting people in chains, all right? How do you deal with people and environments that take you away from that which you know is right and take you to that which you know is wrong? There are a few things I want to mention in this particular regard because after today's khutbah, I knew that the very first question I was going to get asked was going to be about this. I absolutely knew it. That, well, what do I do about my environment? You know, I understand suffidatu shayateen, but I still go to work every day and I'm around certain things and I hang out with certain people and I'm in this environment and that environment. What do I do about that? Okay, and I understood that that was going to be the first concern. So I want to speak to that for a moment. And I'm going to give you three things to remember here. Number one, change your environment. Number two, if you can't change your environment, change yourself in that environment. And then the third thing, if you can't change your environment or change yourself in that environment, then leave that environment if you can. Okay? So those are three things. The first one, what does it mean to change your environment? Well, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that a good friend is like one who sells fragrance. If you purchase from him or don't purchase from him, you're still going to smell good after you've been around that person. And that a bad friend is like one who's a blacksmith, or let's use the cigarettes example. One who smokes, even if you don't smoke, you're going to smell like smoke if you're around someone who's smoking, right? The smell of it will get you. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, am I putting myself in unnecessary places and in unnecessary environments that I don't need to be in the first place? And can I really say that I'm sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in wanting to put a distance between myself and my sins if I consistently put myself in the places where I'm most likely to commit those very sins? It's the very first thing you have to ask yourself. Am I really putting myself in unnecessary places? Do I really need to be around the people that I need to be around or that I'm around all the time? Do I really need to be in those places? We mentioned that on the Day of Judgment, in fact, it was read in Surah Ali Imran, يَوَدُّ لَوْ أَنَّ بَيْنَهَا وَبَيْنَهُ أَمَدًا بَعِيدًا. A person would wish to put a great distance between themselves and their sins. So we mentioned that in the first place. So am I putting myself in unnecessary exposure to those bad habits and to those sins? No person, and I'm going to reiterate this and it might hurt. You made some new friends hopefully tonight, inshallah ta'ala. No person is worth your akhirah. No human being is worth your akhirah. And if that person is taking you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or leading you into bad habits and leading you into destructive behavior, I don't care how offended they're going to be if you need to move on. It's not worth your hereafter. It is not worth your akhirah. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, what if it's an environment, though, within that first category that I can't change? Something that I'm in. What if it's my workplace? What if it's the nature of my profession? What if it's my family? What if it's people around me? So then I need to ask myself, am I capable of actually changing that environment? Making progress with that environment as a whole. What does that mean? The Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرْ فَلْيُغَيِّرُهُ بِيَدِهِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ. That we start there. Whoever amongst you sees evil, let him change it with his hand. That doesn't mean punch people in the face, by the way. What that means is that you are in a place of authority to actually change the very nature of that gathering and the way that that entire community or that entire space functions. You're in a place of power and you're capable of making that change. If you can't do that, فَبِلِسَانِهِ, then speak. And let me tell you something. We become extremely insecure with our faith. And yes, our religion does not teach us to be judgmental or condescending or hateful. But our religion also does teach us to have a backbone, especially for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and especially when we see clear wrongdoing around us. Our religion does teach us to speak up. In fact, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, "La yahqir ahadukum nafsa." Let not one of you belittle himself. And the companions asked, how is it that we could belittle ourselves? The Prophet ﷺ says that you see something that is wrong, and it's a clear wrong. It's not an ikhtilaf or a difference of opinion or a gray area. It's a clear violation. It's blatant, obscene, and it's right in front of you, and you don't say anything. Why? Because you were afraid, or you were shy, or you were insecure. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would raise that person up on the Day of Judgment, and Allah would say, you were in this environment and you saw something that you should have said something, but you didn't. Why is that? And the person would say, khashaytu nas, I was afraid of people. Now that fear is not necessarily the fear of punishment, but the fear of repercussion, the fear of isolation, the fear of consequences that are more emotional in their nature, which is a much greater fear. Allah mentions, la yakhafuna lawmata la'im. They don't fear the blame of the blamers. That's a much greater fear, because that hurts more than a physical type of consequence usually, okay? And so that person would say, khashaytu nas, I was afraid of people, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would respond, wallahu ahaqqu an yakhsha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more deserving and more worthy of being feared. So you should think of your Lord first. Again, that doesn't mean being condescending or speaking bad words. Da'wah is not in bad words. Da'wah is not condescending. Da'wah is in beautiful wisdom. That's the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it. But at the same time, you should not be so insecure with yourself that you don't speak to clear wrongs in your spaces. Okay? And then the second one is change yourself in that space. If you can't change that space with authority, and you can't change that space by saying anything, change yourself within that space. What does that mean? The power of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any space that you may be. The Prophet, peace be upon him, called the remembrance of Allah, dhikr, a fortress. It's hisn al-Muslim. It's the fortress of the Muslim. To be constantly in a state of remembrance, to be doing dhikr. That does not mean having a tasbih and doing this, and engaging in conversations. This isn't going to do you anything if you're not saying anything. But that means that constantly keeping your mouth wet with the remembrance of God. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, keep your mouth moist with la ilaha illallah. That you're constantly in a state of dhikr. That by reminding yourself constantly of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you won't be caught by a heedless environment. So that's the second thing. And by the way, everyone close your mouth for a moment. Close your mouth all the way. Say la ilaha illallah just with your tongue alone. Ibn Hazm rahimahullah mentions one of the benefits of la ilaha illallah is that you could say it with your mouth closed. So I could be looking at you right now, and I just said la ilaha illallah. Because la ilaha illallah is all said from the tongue, not from the mouth. It doesn't require any movement of the face. So yes, you're at work and you're looking at someone that's speaking utter nonsense, hopefully not a customer, and you're saying la ilaha illallah. You can always be in that state. That's one of the reasons why it's called kalimatul ikhlas, a statement of sincerity. You can always keep your mouth moist with la ilaha illallah. It's a good habit to have, to constantly be saying la ilaha illallah. So transform yourself in the space if you can't transform the space. The third thing, is if you can leave that space, if you can leave that environment that you can't change, then do so. That's the last part of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. If you can't change it with authority, if you can't change it with your tongue, then hate it in your heart. وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ, and that is the weakest of faith. That does not mean stay in a space that you shouldn't be in and just hate it inside. That means leave those spaces. Don't be in those spaces and feel a sense of regret that you weren't able to change it. And look for ways to still change that space. Don't give up on people. But at the same time, take yourself out of environments that you don't need to be in. And hate in your heart that you weren't able to change it with your tongue or with authority. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our hearts, to purify our tongues, to purify our environments through our hearts and through our tongues. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.